Welcome or welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. You guys remember our great conversation with Sean Keane? Well, he told me to talk to a very fascinating, a very kind, and a very special person by the name of Jason Duck Barber. Everybody calls him Duck, though, around the world. So basically, as I've come to learn, you have had a wonderful life so far. You've also had a very unusual life so far. You're a farmer. You've done many things in your community. And overall, you're just a fascinating, fascinating human being. So if you don't mind me asking the question I've asked other people for the past 5 years, who is Jason Duck Barber? Go.
I guess you would say I'm just an old country boy from southern middle Tennessee. I have owned and operate a 100-acre family farm. I have a condition of doing all this while suffering from a condition of retinitis pigmentosa, or should I say, has deemed me legally blind since around 2009. So it's a progressive and degenerative condition, which a lot of you in the visually impaired community know about and can relate to. Mine is just a little bit different than a lot of people with RP, meaning most people, from what I discovered, they lose a lot of their peripherals and keep some of their central. Well, mine is almost opposite. It's more or less my central vision has decreased and I still have peripheral. So even though it's quite a bit limited, I can still function by utilizing peripheral vision. I feel like I'm a pretty honest and straightforward person. You ask me, I'll shoot from the hip. I'll tell you like it is. No sugarcoating it. It is what it is. But the way I look at it, there's a lot of people out there that's got it a whole lot worse than I do. So I just take what I've got and what the good Lord's blessed me with and keep trucking on.
Well, that sounds good. That is a great monologue and a great attitude to have. Absolutely. So why don't you start, for those who've never seen your documentary, I think it would make sense to kind of, tell your life story in, the order of life. So your childhood, start there. What were some of those first experiences that you can remember? If you were to go back and say, my first memories or some of my most impactful memories from my childhood, that, kind of set you up for where you are now in life. So talk for a bit about, upbringing, childhood. Let's kind of start there at the childhood.
Well, what I'm going to do, I'll give you a very abbreviated, we mentioned the documentary. I do have, which we'll get into that a little later, but I do have a 1-hour documentary more or less spotlighting my life journey from childhood up till most recent times. And then within my YouTube channel, that would give people an opportunity to see what I'm doing from that point forward. To reiterate on my childhood, growing up in southern middle Tennessee, I've been around our family farm since childhood. We actually did from 1970, which when I was born, up till 77 or 78, I actually lived on our farm. So I had farming access at a childhood on a daily basis. When I wasn't in school, I was on the farm. I stayed with my grandfather quite a bit. No disrespect to the rest of my siblings, but I was kind of the only one that stayed on the farm and just felt like that's where I needed to be. And my grandfather brought me up, taught me a lot of lifelong lessons. First thing, being determined, or as we would say here, bullheaded, meaning we don't like to take no for an answer, and we refuse to be beaten, meaning don't tell me we can't do something. He was always that type of person. That was just nothing but opening up a challenge for him to tell him he could not do something. He would do every way in the world to prove you wrong. A lot of times successful, but of course always those unsuccessful moments, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. Not only a work ethic, but also financially taught me how to stretch a dollar, how to be frugal with funding, and being on a farm. A farm is definitely not cookies and cream, meaning it's not one of those things you're going to get rich at doing, but you got to have a passion and want to do it. Farming is more of heart than financial. So if you can stay ahead of the game, break even, maybe put a few extra coins in your pocket, that means farming successful. Farming is based on a series of averages, meaning you're maybe going to have one or two really, really good years, and then you're going to have that 1 or 2 years that's just going to, well, for lack of better words, suck. So, you're going to really do good and you're going to really do bad. And of course, if it's one of my cliches or my saying is if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So, I just poured my heart into it, continue doing it. Like I said, I grew up on it. We actually moved and around 78, 1 mile up the road to where my parents purchased a small farm, about 25 acres, and which is where I reside now. Once my dad and my mom, passed away, which that's also kind of my documentary we'll touch on later. She passed away in 2018, and then my dad in 2020, which I was fortunate to be able to purchased the home that we grew up in from my brother, who actually inherited the home. And then I inherited the 100-acre farm that's 1 mile down the road, which I tend to even today, primarily by myself, even with a vision disorder, which that's not saying that, when I do need help, I can call on help. I'm really, really blessed in my community with great family, great friends. And so, they know that I do everything I can do by myself, but if I do call on them, I'm good to go. And, when I say childhood growing up on the farm, within my documentary, there's actually home video movies of me as a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, splashing in mud puddles on my antique toy tractor, being in my grandfather's lap, driving a track, stuff like that. So you can actually I'd say there's very few documentaries that you're going to get that vintage of footage and actually take a walk into my childhood and follow me from that point forward.
Yeah, yeah, really fascinating. Really, really cool stuff. I'll tell you a little bit more off air. I'll tell you on air, though, that I grew up. Now, I'm not there now. I'm in some other state. But I actually grew up in Maryland, and the part of Maryland where I grew up, and you'll know what it is right away. It was the part of Maryland where they farmed tobacco for many years. And as you know better than I, the state of Maryland eventually would start paying farmers to stop growing tobacco. But the part of Maryland where I grew up was basically one of the main places where tobacco was grown. So I remember that a lot of the people who lived around me when I was a boy were farmers. We were not, but we lived near them. So, yeah, farming is really special. And if we never had farms, well, we wouldn't be around if we didn't have farmers like you. So when you were growing up or even, looking at just how a farm works. So by the way, so how does a farm work? What crops did you grow? And when you look at the economics and the mechanics of farming and agriculture, how does it work?
Well, honestly, for our farm, predominantly ever since my childhood, we've been a beef cattle and we raise hay and such as that. In the earlier days, back in the 1930s and 40s, my great grandfather and my grandfather, as well as his brother, my uncle, they had was a general store, and which was known as J.B. Barber and Sons General Store, and they actually had a peddler wagon, and so it's kind of been there's a bit of historical artifacts to our place as far as not just farming, but they stepped into the realm of the general store. I actually have a cousin that even though, well, he still actually owns the general store. The building is still there. He's actually a musician. I'll give him a shameless plug. It's the real Big Smo. He's kind of a what he called hick hop, meaning it's kind of a country rap.
Okay.
It's a country rap type deal, and he's been doing that for many, many years. And now he's
Oh,
kind of
cool.
switched over to the Christian genre. But he actually he renovated somewhat of the old general store, and that's when he started out in his early career back in the early 2000s. That was actually his studio. He turned it into a little small studio and done a lot of it there. And then another cousin across the way took a lot of the general store artifacts and done some renovations and kind of created their own little general store montage to kind of give a little historical fact of what our family used to do. So, and of course, they had even way back in the day, it was they had orchards and had fruits and vegetables and your typical farm stuff, horses, hogs, just the overall farm life. But in most recent years, since, well, I'll say the last 55 years, I'm 55 now, uh, as far as I've ever known, it's strictly been just your, uh, cattle and raising hay. And of course, we all back in the day, everybody had a garden, and it wasn't no little bitty, what I would call a Mickey Mouse garden, meaning it was probably a half acre or so, and the whole families all had their own garden, but we all jumped in and gathered the garden and tended to the garden as a family and a unit, and more or less as a community. Because right here in my general area, I've got 3 or 4 relatives that grew up right here. So we're still somewhat of a close knit community and family.
Yeah, super cool. Super cool. So when you grow up on a farm, how do farmers know, when you look at your crop of whether it's beef cows, dairy cows, how do you tell, what cows need to be sold, which need to be slaughtered, which to be end up being dairy? I know you didn't do that, but I'm just kind of wondering, how do farms know and calculate their products and things like that? How does
Well,
that work?
I guess everybody, their farming techniques are case sensitive to their own operation. There's not one solid blueprint that everybody goes by. Everybody's different. But for our situation, of course, the mama cows would have their calves. And then after about 9 or 10 months, we would load up our calves and most of the time would take them to the local livestock market and sell them. Of course, they would either go out to be reintroduced into someone's other farming operation to be bred or whatever, or obviously the male calves wouldn't reproduce. So that would be your steak or your hamburger that you would eat.
Sure.
Periodically we would have our own locally slaughtered and have our own beef, but we've not done that in quite a while. We have now in our local area a few independent, quote unquote, mom and pop, uh, places that sell their own beef that they raised and had processed. Actually, my sister-in-law, her husband's family, they sell beef like that. So we get a lot of our beef there. Not only we know it's good quality beef and we know where it come from, but it's also kind of supporting the family. So we kind of share the wealth and try to benefit one another.
It's delicious. I have relatives who are farmers in Maryland, and one time we went over to their home and they gave us hamburgers, and they didn't tell everybody, every single person at the party. They told me because I'm not squeamish or nervous about it, but they're like, yeah, this comes from our farm, and it's delicious, by the way. Eating beef naturally is so good, so delicious and so important. So that's really good. Really, really good. Yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah, so you started to grow up, and then what are some things that happened, when you were a teenager? Now the teen years for me, just like for anybody, were hard. So what happened when you were a teenager?
I still, even in the early days, even growing up a teenager, I still I had a heart for the farm. And well, I would say my mom and dad both were involved with a lot of community service groups, civic groups, such as one of the big ones was the chapter of the local JCs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the JCs organization, but that
Please
was
tell me. I'm not familiar. Please tell me.
it's a civic group, and honestly, it's been so long since I've been out of it. But I can honestly say I can remember they did a lot of fundraising for like the St. Jude's Children's Hospital
Okay.
and done stuff like that. And, they raised money and helped do things. And I really can't, I was so young when that was going on. I can't remember their actually quote unquote mission statement, but I do know they, and actually back then, that's before things got so politically correct. They actually had a JC's chapter, which was for the men, and the women had JSETs. But it was all the same. They had basically the same mission, but the women had their own group. Well, since in the most recent year, I say recent years, probably the last 20, 25, maybe even 30 years, they just consolidated and it's all together. And they started a chapter right here where I live and grew up in it. And that started probably in the mid 70s and went all the way up into probably the mid 80s. So it went a good 10 or 12 years or so. And they were instrumental in the evolution of the JC's club here, along with a lot of other members, and getting it started and growing it. And I can remember as a child going around to different conferences, and we would, of course, back then, I mean, if we went 2 hours from home to a conference, we felt, I mean, you might as well say we went to California. I mean, it's just a long ways away from home. So that was a real treat for us to get involved with something like that. And I'd say that them being involved in that sort of developed in me, maybe not intentionally, but a heart for public service. And in around 1982 and 83, which had already attempted to start, but it kind of fell through in the late 70s. My dad, and even some of the present and even future members of the local JC's chapter, felt the need to start a local volunteer fire department. And after kicking and scratching and trying to get their foot in the door to get that going, it was actually established and started and opened in June of 1983. And back then, it was such, like everything else, new and beginning. It was, feast or famine trying to get funding to do things, let alone funding to get some good quality training. So they would train themselves, so to speak. And I joke around to people, I was the kid. I wasn't 11, 12, 13 years old. So you hear the term, a lot of these trainings, you've heard the term Rescue Randy. Well, there was no Rescue Randy back in the day. It was Rescue Jason, meaning I was their dummy. They drugged me around houses, took me downstairs, up and down ladders. So I was the one that they used as their training option, which, I mean, was fine. And that kept me intertwined with the department. And also that was kind of not only farming, I knew at a young age I wanted to be a career firefighter. So that just community service in general was planted in me at a young age. So doing public relations and things like that was just kind of second nature to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm in my Lions Club, by the way. I've been in the Lions since I was 18, and I'm 34 now. So yeah, it's really important to get involved in those types of organizations.
That was
So,
another organization my dad was part of, was a local Lions Club. So
well,
he
that's
was,
wonderful.
yeah, he was
You
involved
would
with
be
that
a
as well.
great you would be an excellent Lion. You should definitely be in the Lions. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, the Lions helped me when I was a boy, actually attend the space camp for the blind, actually when I was 12. So that's
Okay.
how I got involved in Lionism, and my father's in the club, and now we're officers in our club. So Lionism is a huge thing. It should, at least it should be a huge thing. So I think
Mhm.
it's important to note that I think a lot of people these days are not aware of the importance, of community service and public service, and it's really important, you know.
I think that goes with a lot of civic groups. I think that people a lot of know about the name, but don't know the mission or the statement, what they do. What do you know? They just have
Sure.
no clue.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And it's really hard to get members in these organizations too. The membership has been dipping every single year. It's fewer and fewer people want to get involved, which is a shame because it's fun to get involved in these civic groups in the right
Hmm.
way. You know, they
Yeah.
it's something to do. It gets you out of the house. You're helping people. You're doing the right thing. You feel better when you do it. You know, I don't know what all these people are doing, but some of these people need to, at the very least, need to start getting involved in civic groups. That would just help them so much. They have no idea how much that could help. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
So you were very influential though in your community fire department. Why didn't you kind of walk through some of those details, ins and outs? Now, when you were now, just so I can kind of keep track of it all, because now I was born blind with glaucoma. Now, no, you were not born blind, obviously, as far as I'm
No.
understanding. So you became blind later on.
Yeah, I was just when I worked, I actually was leading into that. I did become a career firefighter. I actually had the fortunate starting September 1st of 1991. I remember it very well. And I worked my rank. Of course, we were a very small rural department. At that time, we only had like three people on a shift. It was just a county department such as that. So fast forward to about 1994. I was able to move up through the ranks. When I say move up, we didn't have very many career ladder steps, but moved up to a lieutenant and stayed there. And then around 1998, started noticing something going on with my vision. It started out primarily as vision issues at night or raining or something like that. I just could not see as much as I tried. It just wouldn't, it was just kept getting worse and worse. Of course, I mean, I was able to navigate and do very well with a lot of other things, but driving at night, of course, I mean, obviously it's not a good practice to be visually impaired and driving a fire truck. So, that brought on its own concerns, but just in general. So I went and at request of the chief, I went and had some tests run and such as that. And that's when they kind of pointed the finger at retinitis pigmentosa for me. I continued to work about another year and a half. Fortunately, they were able to kind of switch the schedules around and fix it to where I could still be an active firefighter and do a lot of things other than drive the truck. Obviously, for instance, people say, well, how do you fight fires if you can't see well? And I said, well, obviously you've never been in a burning house before, because when you go in, you can't see nothing anyway. So I'm perfect for the job. I already had my way, know my way around. So, of course you
Yeah,
can't see for the smoke and all that kind of
sure,
stuff.
sure.
So it was still a good opportunity, but I felt like it was starting to not only burden me, but it was burdening my coworkers, meaning they were having to shift schedules around and do this to kind of accommodate me. So the chief and we kind of met, and even though it was a difficult decision, I just kind of quote unquote hung up my hat and told
Right.
them, it's just not fair to you guys, and go from there. I mean, in the world nowadays, I mean, I could have really been a quote unquote hard nose and say, nope, ADA says you can't get rid of me. I've got to do this. You got to
Hmm.
do that and whatever. But it just wasn't going to be fair to the guys. So I stepped away, and fortunately the door opened for me I was still able to drive my own personal vehicle. So the door opened.
Okay.
Yeah, I was still able to drive my own vehicle. That's why I say the liability was driving a fire truck. So,
Yeah.
and and I could do it, but there was just that what if. So I was still able to drive. I actually never had my driver's license taken away from me. I opted out myself in around 2008 or so to stop driving. I still
Cool.
have a valid driver's license. Everything's legit, and I keep my driver's license active. Of course, people ask me, well, why do you do that? And I say, well, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, if they come up with a cure for my vision,
Hmm.
I don't have to go back through the process of getting a driver's license. I have it. So
Cool.
I keep it current. Now, I'm sure other states are different, but luckily I'm able to, I mean, now, obviously I take on that responsibility of driving, even if I do have a license. So it ain't like the state would be liable for something. So,
Interesting.
in 2000, that's when I shifted into becoming a 911 dispatcher. I actually did that from 2000 until 2007. And not being boastful or anything like that, but based off the information everybody gave me, they said, you're probably one of the best dispatchers we ever had. Just for the fact that I worked in the fire service for so long, I already kind of had the emergency background to know what responders needed and what questions to ask and what directions to give. So it kind of was like, what do they call that, a duck out of water type thing? It just fit. And I actually enjoyed it probably as much as I did working in the fire service, because I was helping more people, not just fire department, but law enforcement, EMS, and other things. So it was very, very rewarding. Of course, 2007, that's when my eyesight started getting a bit worse. I was kind of forced out of that position as well, and that's when I proceeded the uh, opportunity to see if I could maybe get on disability, and that's when the doctors finally did deem me legally blind. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Well, I kind of have some questions because believe it or not, I don't tell everybody this, but I actually find both of your work in the fire service and the dispatching work very, very, very interesting. So tell me, man, what were some of your most interesting, or let's start with the fire service. So what were some of your most memorable calls, or if you can remember? I'm sure every firefighter has that one story where there was the one call that I'll never forget. Tell me about that experience for you.
So there's so many, but I guess
Yeah, but every
there's
firefighter has one, Duck. Every
well,
firefighter
there's
says,
there's
but there was
one.
the
I guess
one.
I would say, they're all kind of they're. If I had to pick, there's probably 10 total, but if I had to pick one out, um, there was a structure fire. This was probably around 19. I'm going to say around 95 or 6. And I had a rookie firefighter. It was a volunteer, which I knew him for many, many years. And me and him went on a call together. And this house is, when we pulled up, I mean, it was blowing and going per se. I mean, there was flames shooting out everywhere. And there was an elderly guy that was known to be there, but we wasn't sure if there was anybody in the home or not. And we suited up and put the air packs on and went in. Of course, it was the most of the fire was underneath us down in a basement area, but it was starting to come up into the remainder of the house. And here we went on we was basically in search and rescue mode because we didn't know. And, we thought maybe, I can't remember. We thought maybe there was a baby in there or something.
Ooh la
So we
la.
started searching, and we heard one great big explosion one time, and of course didn't know what it was at the moment. Of course, my team member that was with me, he was like, "What the heck was that?" I said, "I don't know, but I think I just crapped my britches." Because it was a loud boom, and we didn't know what it was. It was actually an oxygen tank had fell over, and it was actually spewing air oxygen into the fire, which even made it a little bit bigger.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Oh no.
but I grabbed something which I thought was a baby. I mean, it had little arms and, and I was like, oh Lord, and I told him, I said, wait a minute. I said, I've got it. And I kind of scooped it up and then I started handing it back. And, when they got it outside, they yelled back at me and they said, Duck, you're okay. You just rescued a Chihuahua.
Well, that's still wonderful.
It was a little puppy, which the puppy was deceased, but I didn't know it.
Oh
It was just so
boy.
dark and you couldn't feel that well
Oh
with
geez.
everything. So it was just a little dog. But I would, no disrespect to the dog lovers, but I was glad it was a puppy and not a baby.
Sure. No, that's perfectly fair to say that in this context. That's
Yeah.
perfectly fair. You
So,
probably thought to yourself, "Oh, thank goodness." You probably thought, "Oh, that is sad, but the little puppy's with God," and so that's the situation. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, that's just one. Even though it was a bad, and in the fire service, if you don't make something funny out of the worst situations, it will drive you crazy. PTSD and everything else. So you got to kind
Oh,
of, I mean, obviously with the most, if there was really a death of a child, you can't make fun of that. But that
no, no,
particular
no.
moment, you have to kind of adapt and improvise and overcome whatever, situation it is and try to make the best of it. Back then you didn't really hear that much of PTSD and traumatic,
They didn't
moments in
talk.
life.
Well, right. They didn't talk about it back then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you didn't openly discuss it necessarily. So, but I've seen about anything you could see, anywhere from blood and guts to people burn up and all that kind of stuff. So, it's part of the job. I mean, it's just one of them things that you take into fact. But, that's probably one of the most memorable moments. Of course, I know I was on shift. We had a shift of 3 and actually one of our guys was out on vacation. So that gave us a shift of 2 and it was myself and my captain. And we run 3 structure fires one day by ourselves. So, and of course, we had volunteer firefighters. I mean, we're blessed, but it was during the day, and the volunteers, uh, should I say, the numbers were not very well because everybody was at work or what have you. But I mean, but we always had fun at what we did, and the fire service, I loved it. It was a close knit. I mean, I know it's cliche-ish, but it's a family affair. If you're a firefighter for life, and your family. Whether you're retired, or in it now, present, past, future, whatever. That's just the way it is, and that's that way with a lot of emergency services.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolute. Completely
now
true.
I
Yeah.
had, as far as the 911 dispatching, I've always got this one story that I've used many, many times. It's probably one of the funniest calls I've ever taken. I was on dispatch on shift by myself. Of course, even back then we had a small crew, so sometimes you'd be dispatching everything by yourself. Well, I took a call one night. When it come up on my screen, it was, I noticed that it came up as a payphone. And I'm like, well, okay, this
Oh
is,
boy.
and this guy calls me and he said, I need an ambulance. He wasn't in distress or didn't seem to be in pain or whatever. He just said, I need an ambulance. And I was like, okay, can you tell me why? He said, just send me an ambulance. And I'm like, sir, I can't do that. I've got to know what the problem is so I know what to send and how many people or whatever. He said, well, I just don't want to tell you. He said, send me an ambulance. I said,
Oh boy.
I'm like, sir, I'm not going to just send you a randomly ambulance, whatever. And he said, well, it's kind of embarrassing. So I don't want to say. And then I'm like, right then, I'm like, under my breath, I'm like, oh yeah, you're fixing to tell me what has happened here. Cause I got to hear this story. And, now bear in mind, he was just standing at a payphone and he said, well, and I'll abbreviate. He was like, well, I was actually at my home and I was naked. And he said, I was putting on some clothes and I fell back on my couch and a hanger has stuck me in the butt. And I'm like, okay, let me get this right. You have a hanger stuck in your butt and you've walked to a payphone. And
What?
he was actually at a hotel / apartment nearby. And he said, yes. And I'm like, okay. I said, I'll send you somebody. Of course, I don't know how I can keep myself together. So before I dispatched it, I'm thinking, there's no way in God's green earth I can dispatch this out over the air appropriately. So obviously I knew he was not in like life threatening distress. So I called the ambulance service and luckily I knew the captain on shift and I called her and I said, I've got a good one for you. And she knew when I said that, she's like, oh my God, what have you got? And I told her, and I didn't think she was going to be able to talk on the phone for laughing so much. And, she, she said, I said, I'm not going to dispatch this out completely what it is. And she said, okay. I said, I'm just going to give it out for you to respond to a nature unknown call. And she said, that'll be fine. So I did. And of course, she's busting a gut almost on the radio, checking, responding. And, then she had the nerve to come back and ask me, and she said, dispatcher, is this a non-emergency call or an emergency call? So they knew how to respond with the lights and sirens or not. And I just said, well, if it's me, it's an emergency. So she busted out laughing. And when they got there, they wasn't on scene for just a minute. And then they was checking just, transporting the hospital. Well, they got there. And when they checked out in the hospital, I said, call me when you get back to base and let me know the story. And she did. So it was forever and a day. It was nearly midnight and I got off shift at midnight and she never had called me and they had already checked out at base. So I stopped by there when I was leaving. I said, okay, tell me the story. Oh, she went back to just rolling laughing again. She said, this guy did not have what you would say a hanger. I'm just visualizing a coat hanger or something stuck in his butt.
That's how I'm visualizing it too.
Well,
And obviously
no.
he didn't have that.
He actually had a curtain rod inserted, and I'll just leave it at that. You can paint the picture.
Are you sure?
If I'm lying, I'm dying. And
Well,
it was stuck. So here it is. You got this guy standing at,
how do you even do? Wait a minute. So I don't think I've ever, this is the beauty of podcasting. You hear stuff that I've never heard or visualized. I've never visualized this. So you're trying to tell Aaron's opinion that a guy actually had a curtain rod stuck up you know where and actually had the audacity and no pun intended, the balls to walk to a payphone to tell you?
he had a big pair of sweatpants on. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently this curtain rod was broke or wasn't very long, but it was there. And I was like, well, what did you do? And they said, well, we got him in the emergency room and laid him down face down on the cot and said, she still was laughing. She said, the doctor actually she said, me and another nurse, one got on each cheek and the doctor took the forceps and went in there and removed it. and said that dude jumped up and his words with the doctor was, "I could almost kiss you."
Okay, that's
Instant relief.
Duck. Not only is that a relief, but that's a little. That's one of those.
Now, how it got there, the reason
Well,
it was
Duck, we
there,
don't need to go there.
I just fix to say we didn't ask and we didn't tell. So, we
Oh,
didn't
okay.
care. If that wasn't embarrassing enough, he didn't need any more insult to injury.
Okay. Well, I mean, is he on Facebook? I mean, because you could still ask. You could send him a
Oh,
PM and say,
I'm just gonna let it go.
oh, you are.
I'm just gonna let it go. I'm not gonna ask
Oh,
nobody.
you're sure about that?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, if I could find his name, I would let you call him. But
Well, are you sure you want? Are you sure you want to put that on my shoulders? I mean, I kind of have to put you on that. I mean, don't you just want to know, Doc? Hey, man, like I know I helped you years ago. I just want to know, like, can you just this is between us, man? Like, how
well,
do you?
then I would, if I had knew it and something like that, I would obviously have to tell others, and I just don't want that responsibility.
Well, that is
So,
too that is too much fun, man. There's some
yes,
silly.
I couldn't hold it.
There's some silly stories. I know you didn't know this actually, but being a dispatcher has always been one of my interests. One of my dream jobs, as you can tell, I love talking to people. I love using my voice to help people. So
Mhm.
that's always been a sense of inspiration. And I give a lot of credit to those first responders who are willing to stay up late at night and leave their families and help out the community. It's really special and really important. When you were working dispatch, like how does the technology work? Like I really want to learn about it. How does it work? How does the software work? And
Well,
based on your experience, how did it actually work?
let's just say you locate. Now, I'm going off the data and information that I had when I was there, but
Sure,
you could
sure.
make a phone call here. Like I would be at my house, I could call 911. The signal and the information, I believe at that time would go all the way down to a database in Florida and be back in like 4 seconds. And when we answered, it would pop up on our screen, the name, the address, the phone number, and even then it was getting the early stages of GPS mapping. It would pop up a little map and give you ballpark where it was. Now it's a lot more effective and a lot more spot on, but at least it would give us a certain area. And we could actually pull up on the screen and know if there's any previous history and such as that. But, and this goes for let me say this. Everybody's different. All agencies are different, but we were always taught, when you answer a 911 call, you hear on the TV and movies and TV shows, 911, what's your emergency? Actually, that's one of the last things you even want to know. Did you ever know that?
I didn't. How does it really work?
Well, honestly, it doesn't matter the who. It doesn't matter the what. It don't even matter the why. It's the where. Because if
That's
I
true.
don't know where you are, it doesn't matter what the emergency is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you answer, we were trained that, 911, where is your emergency? Now we know where you're at. Now we can
Exactly.
start filling in the blanks.
Understood.
Because you could
Look,
tell me that
yeah.
Aaron was having a stroke. Well, that's fine. But where is Aaron having the stroke?
Right, right.
So,
Luckily, I've never had to make that. Luckily, thanks to goodness, I've never had to make that call. And luckily, I've never had a stroke. So let's not knock on the wood.
yeah, strictly
Luckily,
hypothetical.
purely, let's not bring karma. And wait a minute, let me just cross all the dots and let me dot all the T's and
Yeah.
cross the I's and dot the T's. Not only has Aaron never had a stroke, but I've never found a way to get a curtain rod stuck up nowhere. Nor am I. But I'm not. I promise, Duck. I just don't want to do it. It would be fun. It would be fun to do it, and if I do it, I'll call you. But I just have to disappoint you. I'm just not that brave.
Well, I
Okay.
don't even see it being fun. So you're in a
Oh,
different
it's
place than
not.
I am.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm a little, I got a little bit of that twisted sense of humor. By the way, I'm not politically correct.
Yeah, I got you.
I got a couple rough edges, I'm a bit of a character. I'm a bit of an odd bird, So the
Yeah,
stuff
well,
that,
that's all right. We all are.
but the stuff, but then again, or everybody does this. I'll tell you a funny story from my family. My father was doing work. This was when we were living in Maryland. My father was doing work on, I don't know, he was like building something on our porch. And hey, he accidentally called that number and he butt dialed it, and then he noticed that he kept on getting this missed call from like the local town where we lived, and he
Uh-huh.
thought to himself, oh boy, oh yeah, I did accidentally call.
Mm.
Sure enough, 2 minutes later, deputy sheriff pulls down the driveway. Hi, are you okay? The deputy apparently said yes. My father said yes. It was an honest mistake. They were like, okay, we heard power tools. That does happen. So yeah, I'm sure. The other thing that dispatchers deal with is not only do they get serious calls, sad calls, but you get a lot of misunderstandings happen. A lot
Yeah.
of confusing calls happen too,
Well,
right?
that's I was telling earlier about the firefighters. We have to find humor. I can't say that for every dispatcher, but for me,
Mm-hmm.
humor was a way for me to de-escalate a situation.
Sure.
You have a panicked mother or child or something like that, and I had to try to make a point to inject a little bit of humor into something to bring that person down. And it wouldn't always work, but for a lot of times it did, because I think it was a comforting aspect of it when you found, you just had to develop your own technique of de-escalating a situation. So
Sure,
that
sure, sure,
that was
sure.
kind of my thing.
Some of the most famous calls are from when the operator has to speak to a child, and those are truly chilling,
Yeah.
sometimes. But
Hmm.
but then again, it's encouraging because we've seen children defend themselves and do the right thing and call the number and help, and then help comes, and then the child is celebrated
Yeah.
later
Oh yeah.
on. So that's really really terrifying on one hand, but really encouraging on the other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as how the discipline, and that's when, even though my eyesight was starting to decrease, I think some of the first, even able to do it, dispatching using computers was, I think one of the biggest thing that I did when I started dispatch was a simple changing the cursor on the screen from white to black
Sure.
and contrast. And that was something that even regular dispatchers didn't even think about till I brought it to their attention for me, but they're like, wow, they're well sighted. And that even was a big help to them, because a little white cursor or, mouse
Hmm.
pointer on a white screen, it's easily to get misplaced. Whereas if it's a solid black one, a larger one, just that one little bit of technology was just huge for me, especially.
Hold on one moment, please.
Got you?
And that's the dog, by the way, as everybody heard. She insists sometimes on joining us, but then again, in other moments she barks hysterically. She's a shepherd mix, so she's a
Yeah.
she's a
I've
she's
got
one of those guard dogs. So she can't help it. I don't know why
oh,
she
I've
was
got a
let in.
mutt. I've got a mutt that's running the floor right now, just trying to. She's an older dog, but she
Yep.
won't know what's going on here.
Absolutely. So yeah, so you notice, so one of the things that you noticed in your life is the importance of observing technology. That's really a huge thing for you, right? So you noticed
Yes.
when you were losing your vision as a dispatcher, you noticed, well, if I just make the mouse black on the screen, that's a huge advantage.
Yes. Uh huh.
So yeah, really if you could expand on that, absolutely. Yeah.
No, it was just like I said. We actually had stepped up. Of course, back then, they were still using CRT monitors. The older, bigger screens, the big old computer monitor sitting there on the console. And about the time I started in there in 2000, um, I might have been right there within just a few months. They switched over to flat panel screens and went to like 19-inch monitors. Of course, now, I mean, you see them big, big monitors, but back then, a 19 or 20-inch monitor was just unheard of, for
Right.
something like that. So
Hmm.
it was obviously a big step up in technology just moving to that. Of course, now, I don't know how dispatchers do it. I don't know how big the screens are and the contrasting colors, but now I think they could switch the color schemes from from white background to black text, to reverse it to black background and white text, which is a huge contrast. For those that visually impaired understand that too. And that's where I was, as my eyesight started slowly progressing. And even after I left the dispatch center, I didn't know much about contrast. Never really knew what that word meant. And so when I was my regular home computer screens, I would just go through the effort of my way to contrast things was to select all, and it will
Hmm.
highlight all the text.
I know exactly what you mean. And
And I
so
could
does
read
everybody
it.
at home. Yeah.
Yeah, I could read it so much better that way. Everything I would do, I would just start selecting all. And
Okay.
I made that work, and I had cell phone. I was still using an old Samsung flip phone.
Hmm.
It was a Samsung Convoy,
Oh, wow.
and the text on it was the black background, the white text, which was good, and the font was a little bit bigger than your normal most other phones. So I would use it, and then when it finally played out, I couldn't get one to replace it, and all the other ones was nowhere near what it was doing. So I would actually try to find used or refurbished convoys to where I could still keep using them a little bit. And I was having to use reading glasses to read the text and stuff like that.
Yeah, you see, with me, it's really fascinating. I think when you had vision, you had more vision than me because my eyes were never able to do print.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of the thing is that everybody's eyes and mind are set up differently. And some people, although I have usable vision, I can't read, my eyes couldn't read the print fast enough to be able to do that. I just
Mhm.
wondered, it just, that job fascinates me though. I wonder if you ever have known of any other blind people today who are working dispatch and successfully doing it. I'm sure there are. I just don't know
I
them.
would say there probably is, and of course nowadays a lot of your bigger city dispatch centers you have a call taker and a dispatcher, meaning, Aaron would take the call and get the information, and then if it needed to go to EMS, you would shift the call to an EMS dispatcher or a fire dispatcher or law enforcement dispatcher. Of course, our such a small setup, we did it all, call taker and dispatcher. So being visually impaired, I think you could almost be a dispatcher if it only pertained to talking. But when it comes
Right.
to data entry
That's what I'm
and
wondering.
things like that, I'm not saying it can't be possible because you got different levels of eyesight that you could do it. If you had decently central vision, but not very much peripheral, you might could still do it. With especially with now with just say for Windows magnifier and stuff like that. I don't know how in the dispatch aspect of it how screen readers would do that. I couldn't ask
I have
without
no idea. I have
you
no
know
idea. That's why I'm asking you because
yeah.
at one
I
point
mean,
it
I'm
was
not
one of
saying it
my
couldn't be
greatest
possible
interests.
now because
Yeah.
technology has advanced so much that,
Hmm.
I'm not going to say it can't be possible. But, the thing about dispatching is if you got a screen reader, here you are trying to talk over the radio, and then you have a screen reader trying to read the information, and then you're trying to hear your responders talk. So you're really trying to multitask on so many different levels there. There again, I'm not saying it can't be possible, but I would be curious to
It would
I may have
depend
to search that myself to find out.
because Aaron's really curious about it because it's probably one of my dream jobs or something or something that's really important that I want to learn about, because it's all the thing that we never want to have happen. Nobody wants to call that number, but when we do, if we ever do, we want to make sure that the people, answering are well trained and well equipped
Yeah.
to be able to solve. Well, that's deeply fascinating. It truly is. That's quite a story there. All right. So then, kind of moving forwards to sort of around 2008. Then what happened around 2008 once you were declared legally blind? Then what?
Well, that's when I was actually, of course, like I said, deemed legally blind. Did finally get accepted to be on my disability, which, I mean, anybody that knows disability's good, but if you have very many bills at all, it's not going to get it done.
Right.
So fortunately, I was still able. I mean, disability is one of those craziest things I've ever seen in my life. It's a battle to get it. And then for you to get it, they say, well, and like in my interview process, it's like, well, can you work? And I'm like, well, yeah. Well, you can't be able to work at all to get disability. And I'm like, well, I mean, anybody can work. I mean, a quadriplegic can work if you're just blowing up balloons at the circus. You can work. What do you want to define work as? And such
Yeah.
as that. So I said, and I said, the sad part about it is, and this is no disrespect to other people on the other end of the scale, but I said, I actually know somebody personally that's getting disability for being bipolar. And I said, you know what? That one person can take a pill and live a normal life, even with bipolar. I said, with me, if I could take a pill and it fixed my eyesight and I have a normal life, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And I think that would be very offensive to I think that would be offensive to the sensibility of the people who truly do have bipolar. Fortunately, I don't have that, but many of my friends do, and this is a very
Yeah.
serious thing. I've never heard of being on disability just for having bipolar. I have noticed that people who have bipolar, when they do work, they're amazing workers.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm giving an opinion. Bipolar is not disabling in that sense.
Yeah.
That should not, I'm giving another opinion. That should not count for I need to be on disability because I have bipolar.
Yeah. Well,
No,
I'm actually related to that person that I'm telling you about. So that's
sure.
how I know the interaction of it, and later on, I had two relatives that was that way, and one of them actually was able to quote unquote conquer it and handle it and get off of it and was fine and lost the disability, which was fine. I mean, they were okay with that. Hey, now that I'm back to normal and I'm, can lead somewhat of a normal life, even with
Okay.
bipolar, and I'm okay. That's fine. But the other one just kept milking the system for as long as they could. And it was no disrespect when I say that. I'm not saying that even with bipolar, if you qualify for disability, that's great. But the thing about it, you can take some sort of medication to regulate it and help you out. Whereas with someone with blindness, you don't have that option.
Yeah,
So it's like,
those are two totally different things. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's just like, but it is separate. But when it comes to disability, it didn't make no sense. I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's like, why is this person here?
Understood.
You
Understood.
know,
I mean, a lot of things don't, I mean, most things that make sense actually don't make any sense at all when you stop and think about it.
yeah. But
That's,
I was able to finally get in contact with some right
Mhm.
people and explain my situation and told it. And going back to what I was saying, they said you can't, this kind of goes back to the part that don't make no sense. They said to get disability, you're not able to work at all. But guess what? After you get it, you can make so much money and be okay. I'm like, well, wait a
Well,
minute. This is kind of counterintuitive, ain't it? It's
it
like,
is. So from what I know, and I'm a young kid, I'm 34. So from what I know is that all these social things, a one sentence summary, they were started in the 1940s. And they were started for the reason that there were just simply too many veterans that were coming home that needed too much help, along with wives and widows
hmm
who needed too much help. And so at the time when these things were initiated, right, at the off or from the get go, as we say, the purpose was important then. But of
yeah,
course, mathematically, anybody can stop and think and do the economics. Eventually, the economic pyramid eventually collapses. And that's kind of what really happened over time. I mean, as I say, I'm 34. Everybody in my family lives into their upper 90s. So,
yeah,
my family doesn't just die off. We're sticking
yeah,
around. So, I mean, I'm going to have to figure out what to do when all these government programs eventually do collapse, and they will. And it's no insult to anybody, but it's just
yeah,
these economic models. they're just models. They last for a time until the mathematics runs its course.
Mhm.
And for the people that can't understand that, well, that's on them. But it's time that people understand that if you're able to work, you need to start working. You need to
Yeah,
find something to do and
yeah,
start working.
that's right. And that's why I still, I couldn't, I ain't gonna say I couldn't, but to be comfortable and be able to enjoy life, I still do the farm work. Of course, which we can touch on that in a moment, but farm work itself, it's not a big money maker. It's a passion to be able to do something, and
Right,
be able
sure.
to do that and carry on a family legacy. It would be easy enough for me to sell the property and cash out and be okay, but that's not what you want to do, nor is that what your heritage would want you to do until it was absolute have to.
Yeah, that's not in your spirit.
No,
It's not in your soul as a farmer.
no.
I totally get it. Totally understand. Yeah, yeah. Now I've only been to Tennessee, the great state of Tennessee once. Of course you're familiar with Pigeon Forge, right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that place. I used to have, and I still have a fascination with parrots. So I went to Parrot Mountain one time.
No, okay.
And yeah, that's the only reason why I went. It was, I'll tell you the story, what led up to it. I was fascinated by birds, which I'm less fascinated with them now. Now I'm more of a snake and chameleon guy now. But I was fascinated by birds. We were living in Maryland. My guide dog had just passed away, and my father felt bad, obviously. So he's like, "Okay, I'll take you out to Tennessee one time. You can go hang out with birds." So we did. That whole Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, right? That whole
Yes.
area. That's a quirky part of Tennessee.
Oh
There's some
yeah, yeah.
stories there. What's going
It,
on there?
like I said, it's that I only go up there. My wife, her brother-in-law, and his side of the family. Actually they have a cabin up there. They built a great big cabin, and
Oh, wonderful.
we go up there. Well, about once a well, her mother and sister and the women. They'll make a trip up there in November, once a year, kind of a getaway type thing, and use the cabin. Of course, they rent their cabin like a lot of people do up there,
They
and
lease it out. Yeah.
yeah, they lease it out, and then of course, they reserve it for themselves every so often. But it's a nice place, and I don't mind going, but it's just not on my top 10 list to go and stay for long amounts of time. I mean, if the most enjoyment I get is obviously the food, so
Love it.
that's you're definitely going to get all different levels of food up there, and that's great. But of course, now my wife is great, which that's fine and dandy for her. Obviously, she loves the scenery. Well, for me, that's not a good plan.
Right.
You just don't. That's such beautiful scenery. Well, for you, it is. For me, it's just something to look at
Yeah. Yeah.
because I
No,
can't.
I did some walking. There's a lot of places to walk around. It's a very pleasant place. It's a
Yeah,
very quirky and pleasant little town. Yeah.
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 Oh, it's a neat little place to go to, and it's like a lot of places. It's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Well, I mean, if you did live there, you would work in the tourism. You would either work at Parrot, you would work in the bird place, or you would
Yeah,
work in one of the
yeah,
stores.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's where their money comes into play. That's obvious.
That's obviously all the money that goes into that place is just
Mm.
that those two main things, the stores,
Yep,
museums, the quirky little tourism there. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. How often I've also never been to Music City. I've never been to Nashville or those cities. What do you know about Nashville? How often do you go there?
I don't. I go up there maybe sometimes once, maybe a year. Once it's not a. I mean, even though I'm only about an hour southeast of there, it's just something I don't frequent. Just I'm not saying I don't like it and I don't want to go. It's just too much hustle and bustle for me.
I see. I
You, you
see.
know, it's just not my.
So would Nashville be like, to me, would it seem like a big city with like buses and taxis and like action?
Yeah,
Like, is
yeah,
it
I'd
that
say
big of
that.
a
Yeah,
place?
it's about the biggest. I mean, it's like one of the top grown. We've actually got a city town, whatever you call it, in between myself and Nashville called Murfreesboro, and it's probably one of the top growingest cities, in the state. Probably maybe the top because, as a matter of fact, it's the population of Murfreesboro, Rutherford County. We adjoin to it, and it's actually overflowing to us, and a lot of our farmland is being gobbled up by developments.
Mm,
So, so it's just an ongoing struggle that we
yeah,
have now. But, to revert back to Nashville, it's another good place to visit, but something you wouldn't want to stay,
I see. I
you
see.
know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, unless you worked there or had a place there or had family there or had a specific job there, then you would want to stay. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and even at that, it's so expensive to live there, even if you work there. That's why so many people live out toward me and commute
hmm.
just for that fact. Now, Nashville's changed obviously a lot in 25 or 30 years. We used to have an amusement park there. You may or may have not heard it. Opryland, the Grand Ole Opry. Well, we had
Sure,
what they
vague.
call,
I'm not an expert, but I'm not an expert about Tennessee at all. But no, I mean, I've heard of Grand Ole Opry. I've heard of that place. I didn't know there was an amusement, but I've vaguely heard of these things. Sure.
yeah, they
Yeah.
had a big amusement park. It was like, well, it was our redneck Six Flags over Georgia, so to speak.
Okay.
It was a big amusement park family, and that's what changed over. They actually tore it down. I can't remember how many years ago now. It's probably been 30 years or more, and they built a big mall there in its place where it was an amusement park. Now it's a great big shopping mall. But back in those days, that's just how the world's changed. You literally, it was always known that back then parents, they literally could take their kids, whether it was 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, whatever, and drop their kids off and leave and go do something in Nashville. And the kids were safe. They're always
Yeah.
taken care of. It was a big park, but it wasn't that big. People just learned to navigate it. And it was a family, wholesome, really place to be. But now, parents wouldn't even think about doing. They'd be arrested for doing something like that now.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends on yes, probably. It depends on who the children are with and the context and,
Yeah,
you know, but all of that is really, really, really interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I will say, I'll tell you off air, there's a particular town in Tennessee where there's a lot of listeners of Aaron's opinion. So I'm guessing that's you. Because I noticed that we've been getting more people in our audience from the state of Tennessee in the download. So I was just
yeah,
wondering, how that happened. It must have been you and some other people must have picked up the podcast from Tennessee
could
and things
have,
like
could
that.
have.
Yeah, yeah. But okay, so now we're up to roughly 2000. What year do you think we're up to now? 2010.
Yeah, right around 2009 and 10. That's when things, and I just kind of. As far as life in general for me, I kind of got settled into the fact of reality that I was slowly losing my sight, and it's either fight it or embrace it. And, I just chose to embrace it and continue. I'm still, even now, I'm an active member of my local volunteer fire department. I'm actually the assistant chief here. When I was diagnosed, and at that time I was a captain when I was first diagnosed with it. And I told my department, if you want me to step away because my condition's going to get worse and I'm going to
Mhm.
get more and more limited to my participation in the department. But I said, I'll do whatever the department wants to do. I'll drop down from my rank, or I'll just
Mhm.
resign from the department or whatever. And they was all a mutual understanding. Said, well, quote unquote, they said, you know how to bump your gums, don't you? Meaning you know how to talk. And I'm like, yeah. They said, well, you can be our PR guy. I do fire. And even when I worked at the fire department as a career, and even 911, I'd done a lot of PR. I'd done a lot of the fire prevention, going to schools and talking and going to speaking at anywhere from a daycare group all the way up to senior citizens. I talked to about every different genre of group of people there was to just do public relations. And that was kind of that went back to my mom and dad's civic duties, being involved with civic groups and organizations, learning how to talk and communicate with different people on whatever level you need to communicate with. I mean, you obviously can't talk to a group of senior citizens about fire prevention the same way you do a first grader,
Right.
or
Certainly
talk
not.
to a third grader the way you do somebody a senior in high school as a career day type thing. So you had to always know how to shift to your audience to be able to present. So that's why I've kind of always developed that bit of a knack to talk to people and communicate. So the fire department kind of kept me around in that capacity, as kind of not only the PR aspect, but I'm actually the oldest as far as not age, but I'm the oldest tenured member of the department, meaning I grew up in it since the age of 12. So I kind of stick around to share with our younger recruits that's joined on the historical aspect of the department, where it come from. I mean, I just, when they complain about something about the department, I'm like, you just don't know how good you have it now. Cause the founding members had to kick and scrape and scratch around to get what little bit of funding they could get. And here you are making 3 or 4 times more than what they ever made back then. So you're able to have a lot nicer equipment and a lot of things that used to back when it started. The volunteers, their schooling, they paid for themselves. Their fire gear that they purchased, it was sometimes a lot of times hand me down, but they purchased it themselves. And anything pertaining to the department, well, now we've been blessed enough to have good fundraising, good money coming in, that our volunteers don't have to foot the bill for nothing, and we wouldn't expect them to, because it's so much more now expensive to be a volunteer what it was 40 years ago.
Right.
So that's why I
Absolutely.
try to really emphasize where they've come from. Now, whether they care or whether they really understand that, I don't know, but I at least tell them that way,
Absolutely.
so at least they've been told.
You could also remind people that if they ever complain about the fire department, you can always say, at least we don't ask for money anymore when we show up. They used to do that. Some of the first
Yeah, some of
departments
we've
ever.
always been, donating. And I said,
Yeah.
and a lot of them has moved in here from other states and other areas, although the department's been here for fixing to be 43 years, almost 44 years. The fire department, fire protection in our county is relatively young in relation to the community. We didn't really start till 1983, which that seems like a long time ago, but if you put it in the broad scope of things, how old our county is, it's still young, if
Oh,
that makes
sure.
sense.
It does. It
That's
does.
just like 911. People think 911 has been here forever, but 911 didn't start in our county until around 1990 or 1986 or
Right.
so. That actually 911 in general, I'm wanting to think historically, I don't think it even began for the country until I want to think 1982 in Haleyville or something like that, Alabama.
I don't know the history. I thought it was earlier. I thought it was the 60s with
No,
some of
no,
the
as far
prayer.
as the actual, going implement, I'm not saying it didn't exist, but as
Right.
far as going into like a full blown implementation, I think it was in the early 80s. I'd
You're
have to go back and
correct.
look, but I'm almost sure it's in Haleyville, Alabama, is where
Well,
it's.
that's pretty cool. That would be pretty, I've never given that any thought. It would be pretty fun to interview. Like, I'm sure who knows if they're still with us now, but it would be really cool to sit down for a long form with anybody who like worked like some of the first dispatchers ever in that section or in that office. And they could say, and I was some of the first calls that we ever picked up. And that would
Yeah.
actually be really cool. I've never given that any thought. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when our fire department started here where I'm at back in the day in 1982 and 83, the dispatching was actually firemen's wives, meaning it was a phone tree. The person would call. It wasn't 911 back then. It was actually a number called. It was 9221. It was a regular phone number, and the 9221 would ring into the main fire station, and a big buzzer would go off. Well, one of the guys on shift would answer, get the information, and then he would call. Say, for instance, in one of my areas, he would call one of the firemen's wives, give them the information, and then they would get on the phone and call their other firefighters' wives and send out the information, and they'd have to go to them and tell them, or if they was at home, they got the information. That was before the day of cell phones and such as that. So it was a very, very complex way of getting the alert out.
I wonder how quickly they were able to do it. I wonder if you've ever given thought to how quickly they were able to get the information and go to the house and put out the blaze and save the people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how quickly would that have, how much of a help would that have been back then is what I would wonder.
Oh, it
Yeah.
would have been. I mean, you would save minutes where, before, it would, now, you pick up the phone and then all your if you call 911, by the time the call is made, the dispatch gets the information and the call goes out, you're looking, less than a minute,
Right.
for all that to get in motion. And then, the wheels are turning for response probably within 2 minutes from the original call or less.
Yeah, we're
So it's
really,
really, it's really come a lot more advanced. Cause I
oh,
mean,
it's come a long way. We're really lucky, as we say. Hopefully, I'll never have to make that call, but if I did, it would be very easy. It's much easier now. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
that's exactly right. Yep. So it's come a long way, but, yeah, just kind of, that's when, I forgot, we kind of trailed back off on different stuff. But now, I got involved with the fire service and doing the fire prevention, and even with the volunteer department, I continued doing that. And my life in general, from, let's just say from 2008 or nine, it was kind of on autopilot. My parents, of course, were still here and healthy, and they lived, I mean, just across the field from me. So I'm the only one that was here close to them as far as siblings. So I would take care of them. They take care of me. They drive me around. I would do different things. I would do some, volunteer work at the school down here and from like 2011 through around 2017. So life was good. I was being involved with the school and doing different things and helping out there. And then, of course, my dad in the later, I guess around 2010, 11, somewhere in there, he started developing Parkinson's and some dementia. Not bad, but it was just early stages, but it was slowly getting worse. And I guess, you know, he had some back surgeries. So, of course they were getting older, right around 70 then, and him and mom both. So their health was starting to decrease, but luckily I was right here with them. So we were able to help me out and I was able to help them out. So it worked out very well.
Yeah, yeah, really, really fascinating. All right, so now let's get up to 2020, pandemic, right? Pandemic hits, then what? I'm sure there was a lot of changes then.
Well, I would say the life really, 2018 is when my life really got shifted into a whole other gear unexpectedly. Uh, my mom in January of 18, she had back surgery. Of course, my dad was, still dealing with his Parkinson's and dementia, but still was relatively independent. But while she was in rehab, I kind of had to turn in to be his caregiver and help with medications and, make sure his doctor visits was in order while she was in the rehab center and all that. And, so I guess God kind of put wheels in motion for me to be prepared for what was to come in February 14th of 18. Mom had just got out of rehab about 2 weeks or so prior to that. And she wanted to, on Valentine's Day, she wanted to go to one of her favorite restaurants in our little town here. And I wasn't going to go, but she called me and asked me to go. And I said, well, no, it's Valentine's Day. You and Dad go to lunch. It's fine. And she said, no, it's just another day, whatever. You come with us. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll go with you. So I loaded up with them and we, just a normal everyday conversations going into town. And we parked and got out of the car and I walked ahead of Mom and Dad. I got to the crosswalk and, kind of listened for traffic, which it was in the middle of the day, so traffic wasn't terrible. And as I stepped across the sidewalk on the other side, I heard a little tire bark, squeal, whatever you want to call it. And when I turned around, my mom and dad both was laying in the middle of the street.
Oh my
A
gosh.
pickup truck had come around the corner and basically mowed right through both of them. So when I turned around, there they both laid in the middle of the street. And I thought they were both dead. And I got to my dad, and he was laying flat on his back, unresponsive. And my mom, she was kind of sitting up a little bit, kind of hunkered over, but I could tell being being in emergency services by her respirations, it wasn't good for her either. I said, she's not going to make it. And, of course, luckily, it's kind of a blessing me being involved with emergency services. I called 911, gave them the pertinent information. And when the medics and everybody showed up, they all knew me. So, and they knew the information I was giving them was accurate. So, while I was sending to mom the best I could, dad woke up and he was like, Duck, what happened? So I knew dad was still alive. He apparently was just knocked unconscious. And, so the medics and stuff all started taking care of mom, which she had, uh, she was bleeding internally. I have to say that I could tell. So I knew it was bad. I just felt then she wasn't going to make it. And, so I stuck with dad and sure, and yeah, we knew when they got transported on further that she wasn't going to make it. The doctor says, she's got some major internal injuries, head trauma, and she's just not going to make it. So we had already faced up to the reality that she wasn't going to make it. And slowly my dad, he started coming around better and better. And within 3 or 4 hours, he was kind of about back to normal as far as his mindset. So we had to opt out. We was forced in a difficult decision as a family to take mom off of life support. So here we are now. Mom was always our rock. She took care of everything. Everybody else came before her. Well, at this time now we've lost her. Now what are we going to do? I've got a dad, 72-year-old dad with Parkinson's and dementia, and here I'm kind of his caregiver and can't see and can't drive. So, which he was still, even after he come out of that, he was able to drive somewhat. It was still cautious, but he still was doing relatively well. But we had friends, and he made friends with some other people, they chipped in helping him and all of that. But he actually wound up in 2020, 2 years later, a little over 2 years, he had a stroke, and more or less we lost him. And so, here I had this 100-acre farm with all this livestock and stuff, and me and dad always worked together as a team because he was kind of more or less the eyes of the operation, and I was the brawn of the operation. So now, what am I going to do? So this is where, I guess if you want to call it testimonial part of this whole journey, am I filling in the blanks for you before I go much further? Everything good?
Yes, everything's fine, Doc. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll make sure you're still there. I didn't want to, when I get on my roll, you got to watch me. So, but, in 2018, we'll back up after mom passed away. That fall, now ex-sister-in-law, her and my brother got divorced. But anyway, she was my sister-in-law at the time. She was at a cross-country meet, with my niece, and she got to talking to another parent there, and her name was Eileen. And they just small talk, got to talking, and she's like, "What do you do?" And Eileen says, "I work for the University of Tennessee in Knoxville at the ag department." And they was like, "Oh yeah, well, what do you do?" And she said, "Well, I work with farmers with a program called Agribility. And Agribility is an organization that helps farmers who are disabled for whatever fashion find a way to continue farming." And then my sister-in-law was like, "What?" It's like, "Really?" And said, "Have you ever been to Bedford County?" And of course, Eileen said, "Yeah, I've been through there. We've got an ag extension officer there." And so Jesse commenced to telling Eileen about me and my vision loss and my dad and I running the farm. And which at that time we never knew dad was going to be leaving us in a year and a half. So, or 2 years. So anyway, Eileen came out. I was introduced to her, and her and my local ag extension officer and another ag person came out. We talked about the farm. some of the hurdles that we was going to have working with my livestock, and what can be done and what not be done, and what assistive technologies could help me to do what I needed to do, or even just improvements to the farm. So they came out, we done a kind of an assessment, and Eileen says, I think we can help. So which Agribility, it's located, I think, in like 22 states in the country. And like I said, they have a really big passion about helping farmers that are disabled. It doesn't matter if they're blind, they're deaf, they got mobility issues, or quadriplegics, paraplegics, military, dealing with PTSD, anything like that. They try to find any way and every way to help you to continue farming. So they reached out to me. I was put in touch with a nonprofit organization located in Jackson, Tennessee, called the Star Center. And what they do is actually they come out and they evaluate you. What's your situation? What do you want to do? What's it going to take, you think, to be able to do what you need to do? And one of my primary obstacles was all of my livestock have ear tags with numbers. And it's that in the record keeping, that number corresponds with the cow, and we keep track of it. The medications, the calves that belong to that cow, the genders, the colors, just all the information. My dad was a really big Excel spreadsheet person. So that's how he kept up with it. So they come out, we evaluated. The strange part about it, which is kind of funny in a way, they'd never heard of a blind person trying to work with livestock. I mean, you just don't visualize a legally blind anybody working with a 1,200 or 1,500 pound cow. You just don't see that. So it was a struggle trying to find the right technology to do what I wanted to do. But there again, my dad was still living, and they recommended certain technologies, and the people that helped me purchase this equipment is Vocational Rehabilitation Services. They're the money people. The Star Center says, hey, Duck's got this, he's got this, we feel like this device, this software, this right here will help him. So they present that to Vocational Rehabilitation, they evaluate the request, and then they grant or deny the purchase of whatever, in Vocational Rehabilitation Services is actually the money behind the technology. So the very first thing that I received was a Zoom text for my PC. You familiar with Zoom text? I'm sure.
I used it as a boy. I don't use it now, but I'm familiar. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I had that, and that was a pretty good deal starting out.
Sure.
Having to learn it, and then some other technologies, reading cattle tags, which they did read cattle tags fine, but it wasn't designed for somebody visually impaired. So, which that's where I guess, to brag a little bit, I was a type, there again, I was telling you earlier, I don't take no for an answer very well. So just for instance, this electronic ear tag reader, that's got radio frequency tags, and they wouldn't read it. It would read it, but it would put it on the screen. Of course, with visually impaired, you couldn't read it. And so I contacted, this group was in New Zealand, and I was talking to the creators in New Zealand, trying to find a solution. And of course, whenever they would tell me, and as well as others, that can't be done. We can't do that. And I'm like, don't tell me it can't be done. We put a man on the moon in the 60s. Don't tell me it can't be done. So I said, all you would need to do, and I know it sounds simple, but is this stick reader where it puts a number, just put a voice synthesizer on it, that it would actually read what's on the display. It's not rocket science. Just do it.
Sure. It's just like scanning. It reminds me of my guide dog. She had an Avid microchip. You just need a reader that will scan the chip, basically.
Yeah. And you need, and they make scanners, but they need it where it's, voiceover friendly.
Sure.
And per se, when I say voice synthesizer, it would just, you have the option to turn it on or turn it off. If you don't want it, fine. If you do, that's fine. And of course, they even said, well, that sounds pretty, kind of a neat idea, but saying it's a neat idea and implementing it is a whole other struggle.
Right.
But,
Absolutely.
the technology is just, I mean, that was just the door that opened, and then
Hmm.
it just and I even had an Orcam.
Oh yeah.
They got me one of them, but that would not work for reading my cattle tags. Why it wouldn't work? And there again, I was even on the phone with a representative in Israel. I was talking to him, trying to figure out why would this not work? Because a lot of the technology would have to take a picture and process it. Well, in my particular case, the image, i.e. the ear tag, is not a static image, meaning the cow is moving a little bit. The
Sure.
image itself is moving, so it can't really freeze it and take a good, accurate, high resolution photo quick enough. So
Yeah.
that was a struggle within itself. But, I still adapted. Seeing AI, I wound up using it. It seemed like that was working better. And then the world really changed in 2000. I guess now it's early 24. Might have been 23 now. My years have got by. But I don't know if you follow him. Sam Seavey has his YouTube channel, The Blind Life.
Hmm.
And I started following him, and we actually started emailing and communicating. And then he actually had a review of Be My Eyes, but with the new implementation of AI into Be My Eyes. So Be
Sure.
My Eyes, has always been a volunteer based type phone call deal. Well, now they have AI incorporated it. And I thought, I wonder how that would work. So I downloaded the app, and one day I was down on the farm and I opened up my camera and I'm like, okay, I'm going to see how this works. And I had a cow that was standing in front of me, and I took a picture. And I mean, it was like, there's a black cow standing in front of you looking at the camera. It has a calm look on its face.
That's
It,
incredible.
it has a yellow ear tag in its right ear, and it's number 82. And then there's three cows behind it. I can't tell the numbers, but there's three cows laying down on the ground behind it. There's there's no leaves on the trees, which indicates it's the fall of the year or early spring. There's a pile of cow dung on the ground behind the cow. It was just opened all of this
Wow.
information up.
That's
And
incredible.
I'm like, now this is the game changer.
Yeah.
My life has just become awesome again. So I would experiment with it, and then, I would go, there was three or four calves that was standing side by side, and I would take a picture, it would process, and it said, there's a black cow on the left with an ear tag of number 15. There's one in the middle that's red, and it has a tag number 18. And then there's one on the right that it's a black cow with a tag 14. And then with the integration of AI, I could ask it. I'm like, okay, what's the cow number in the middle again? Oh, well, it's a red cow with a tag of 15 in it. And it's just feeding me all this information that I never could get before. So, and I tell people, even now with the integration of AI, ChatGPT, that's been like my real, when I do demonstrations now and public speaking, uh, and if I'd really thought about it, I would have done this, and I can't do it now because what I usually try to do, like this Zoom call, I've actually got an old iPhone 10 that I use as my Zoom broadcast camera. And then I use my main camera or my main phone to where I can actually demonstrate ChatGPT within the Zoom call.
Oh
You see what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Yes.
And if I thought about it, I should have done that, and then I could
That's
actually
all right.
I could have demonstrated. But anyway, long story short is that's been my go-to. And that's by far been one of the AI has been one of the biggest game changers as far as in the blindness community, and doing things. It's so easily adaptable. And now Chat GPT. I'm working with it, slowly learning things that I can now. I can access my entire livestock information. I could say, and my AI is named Daisy, and when I say she, ChatGPT gave her own name, Daisy, because I was sitting here one day and I was like, okay, I don't want to just keep saying, hey, ChatGPT, or just blah blah blah. I need a name. I need a name that works good and it stands for something. And I literally it took like 2.5 seconds, and she was like, Daisy. I'm like, Daisy? Where did you get Daisy from?
All
And
right.
she said, well, you're duck. We're in the country. It just fits on the farm. I'm like, well, what does Daisy stand for? She said, it's Ducks AI Smart Yielder.
Okay.
So she gave the name and gave, what it stood for. And
That's
now
pretty
I
cool,
can
man.
say, so I can actually pull it up and I can say, like I just went to a conference just got back yesterday, and I was demonstrating it, and I would be like, I was telling them about AI and Chat GPT, and I was like, oh, I said, well, let me just experiment. And of course, I told her, I said, Daisy, I said, tell everybody exactly what you do to help me on the farm. And it's just like me and you talking. She's like, oh, well, yeah, I help Duck take care of his livestock records and his hay production and all this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, Daisy, let's just give them an example. I said, what was the first calf born in this year's calving season? And she was like, oh, well, it's that gray bull calf named Smokey. He was born on September the 1st, and his mama is number 129 or whatever it was that time. And she had all that information right there that quick, and
That's
whatever I
fantastic.
wanted to know.
That is life changing for
Yeah, so I mean, it just keeps all that. Now, it's not accurate. You got to
sure.
stay on top of it. It's not, you can't, and I tell people, it's not 100% dependable, but what is? Even humans
Nothing.
are not 100% dependable.
Nope, we're not. We're not.
So,
And not only is this revolutionary for you, but think about all the other ways that this technology could be helping farmers who are sighted. This is such a help for so many, you know. That's why it's so fascinating and so exciting, you
well, the
know.
fight that I'm having with it, and I won't say fight, but
Hmm.
the promotion of it is a lot of even some of your older farmers is the AI is going to be the death of the world. It's the devil. It's going to take over the world. It's going to kill us. It's going to do this. It's going to do that, and blah blah blah. And my argument to that, well, two things is I said, well, you probably said the same thing about the internet when it started,
Absolutely.
but now you can't get by without it hardly. So, and the next thing is AI, yes, it absolutely can be bad. But I said it's not the tool, it's the intent. You can take anything and make it bad. You can take a
Absolutely.
cell phone and make it bad. You can take a
Sure.
car and make it bad. A gun, make it bad. It's whatever you want to make it bad. So, two wrongs don't make a right. So, you've got to use it for the intent. Just because I'm using it doesn't mean that I'm going to use it for bad. I'm using it to help and show people the benefit of it. But it don't take one bad. You could have one big story hit the news today about what AI did wrong, which hurt somebody or even killed somebody. And guess what? That's going to be the standard bearer news for the remainder of the year. Do you remember when AI did this? You can't. My dad would always tell me it only takes one uh-oh to outdo 10 attaboys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Duck, you're an absolutely fascinating guy, and I'm so pleased to have you on the show as always. As I knew I would be. After hearing your story, just the way you tell it, and you're so fun to hang out with and talk to. You have such a fun, happy, just pleasant dynamic. You're just such a great guy to talk to, and you're so knowledgeable too. But overall, your personality is just so brilliant and so bright and so cheerful about everything. Really, it's really good. So. We've come to the time of the interview of the episode where I always like to turn the microphone around and I say, so what are some questions Doc, have for Aaron Richmond? What do you really want to know about Aaron's opinion? As I always say, if you can ask me questions to really make me sweat, to get under my skin, what do you want to know about me?
Well, I guess what is your level, or how do you cope with your vision loss? How do you
Well,
use it to a positive aspect of life?
so being born blind is different from becoming blind later, right? So for
Yeah,
me, it was never a loss. It was me. That's the key difference here. That's the pivotal difference. There was never a loss. You
yeah,
know, I came out blind and that's life.
yeah.
How do I use it? Well, I don't use being blind in any sense except for the fact that it's just part of me. It's just life. I don't know. I guess if I wasn't blind, I wouldn't have had the podcasting idea. Probably not. Almost certainly not. My life would have been totally different if I hadn't been born blind. For sure, it would have been. But the most important part is this is, part of the journey of life is we have to figure out the why. The most important part of life, apart from learning and loving and having fun and having a great life, is eventually we all understand the why. And I don't understand the why, nor do you, perhaps. But the most important key here is that for me, the blindness, it's just part of my life. It doesn't really prevent me from doing things, except for, some very small things that are harder, but it doesn't prevent me from living, I suppose, a relatively normal and full life, I suppose, in that sense.
I think you're probably like me, even being born with the sight. I mean, with your vision acuity or whatever you want to call it now. At least you have. If I understood you right, you still have some vision. It's
Correct.
just limited, right?
Correct. So, for example, I could not have a driver's license in my state. Like, I can't drive a car or read a print book. Like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, I couldn't have it if I had to go today and get a brand new driver's license. Never had it. If I never had driver's license, I thought, I'm gonna get my driver's license today. Well, obviously I couldn't get it, but like I said, I had mine, so I was able to, keep it going. Mainly, of course, I've got it for identification purposes naturally, but like I said, Lord willing, if they ever do come up with some kind of magical cure, I won't have that.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like me, and I tell people this, look, I can't sit here and should I say, oh, I can't live my life with somebody that's never had vision, that's in the dark since they were born. Because I tell people, and you may be the same way, I think it depends on how bad my vision gets later on. But I think a person who never has had vision is actually, I watch kind of how you say it because I don't want to come out wrong, is probably better off than somebody that's losing their sight
For sure. For
because
sure. For
that's
sure.
all they know.
Exactly.
You know, it's just in mine. It's been, it's a huge difference from now. We'll just say 20 years. When I
Hmm.
started going to church on a regular basis, in 2008, I could read the church bulletin. It was a little struggle, but I could read it. Now I can't even think about it.
Right.
It's got to that point. But, I still do what I do. And that's what I was, what led you in other than potentially the vision? What brought you in doing podcasting? What made
Sure.
you want
Well,
to do it?
let me back up a little. So from day one of my life, I was immersed in audio. As I said, I was born in Washington, D.C., and we lived now this was when I was a little guy. We lived in the state of Virginia for the first 5 years of my life. Then we moved to Maryland. And so I had a lot of health problems as a baby. I was in and out of hospital for the first 4 years of my life. Basically, I was in and out of hospital, and my mother and father, they would put on the radio, from the first day of my life. So I was listening to conservative talk shows from day one. You can probably guess who it was.
Mm-hmm.
He has since passed on now, but
Yeah.
so we listened to that, for the first, day one, I was hearing a show was my life. My life has been immersed in audio. And then as a boy, my mother read the Harry Potter books to me as a boy, and then I listened to books. listen, 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 listen. And then, as you noticed, as you've said today, the years go by, technology grows, podcasting starts to develop. I listen to more podcasts. And then right around 2020, probably in March of that year, I guess. And I don't know, I'll have some keyboard. Somebody will be typing the precise day that they noticed the show. But I would say in the spring of 2020, it was at the end of my guide dog's life. I was still like I am now, still doing my teaching work like I am now. But I was listening to podcasts around the blindness community. And you know what, Duck? They were not receptive to my opinions. And you, Duck, do not have to like me or agree with me. But don't call me late for dinner, for one. But as
Yeah,
long as you don't call me late for dinner, you can disagree with me until, no pun intended, the cow goes home.
yeah, that's
So
right.
I really figured out, so since I have all these crazy opinions and ideas, and since I can't shut up, won't shut up, and probably should have shut up, but just won't, since I love educating people, why don't I do something with myself? So I really started to go around Facebook groups like you do, and people would ask questions in these groups, blindness groups. Hey, should I go to college? Should I get a dog? Should I do this? Go there, go here. And what I would do is I would create audio files where I would say, hey, Doc, thanks for asking your question in the group. Well, I'm someone who cares in the group and I want to answer the question, blah, 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 blah. And next thing wham, bam, Bob's your uncle, Susie's your aunt. We developed this whole podcast thing where it occurs to me that, well, if I record what I say, that's audio content. And if somebody listens, that's an audience. So then it just kind of clicked into my mind. It was like, oh, you're supposed to be a podcaster. So that's how I got into this. And if I'm not doing this, I'm teaching or listening to other podcasters. But I love the broadcast media space. I really do. That's how it began.
Yeah, that's kind of, well, that's what, and I think being visually impaired, like yourself and me, that's how you obviously gain a lot of your knowledge is listening. Now,
Right.
of course, you gotta, when I say listening, you gotta kind of, it all depends on the source as well as what you're listening to, because just opinions are opinions. It doesn't necessarily
Absolutely.
your opinion may differ than mine, but that's not to say yours is wrong and mine is right or vice versa. And an opinion is a opinion, so, and that's where even with a lot of things that I'm still one of those type that I listen to conservative talk radio here in Nashville. I listen to it pretty regular and I sometimes I feel like an old fogey, but obviously watching TV, it does me no good. First off, you can't believe half of what you see a lot of times on TV anyway. Man, it's not all, and it's the same way with even conservative, but it's something you just have to kind of formulate your own opinion, takes the information that you got and kind of develop your opinion. That's not to say it's right or wrong, but it's just, the political views and everything like that. I mean, I've got family that are totally on a different scope
Oh,
of
yeah.
my thought process, but that's fine. That's their opinion, and we agree to disagree. I hate it when people they're
Hmm.
so hell bent on their opinion that
Yeah, that's
they're
that's
wrong,
really
they're
that's really
right, and you're
scary.
wrong.
That truly terrifies me too. When people become so attached to their opinion that it starts to affect them, that's when you know that's when it becomes troublesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is becoming a real problem. And I see it in other ways too, in the blindness, low vision space. You see it all the time. Somebody says, well, I'm leaving this group because somebody doesn't, people just become too attached to their opinions sometimes,
well,
really.
they don't. Everybody gets. I don't. Well, as we would say down here, everybody gets butt hurt too easy.
Right.
It's just like, come on, people, lighten up. It's just an opinion. If you don't like it, so what? It's no different than you like this football and I like this football team.
Right.
That's your team. Stick with it. That's
Yeah.
fine. I'm not saying your team is better than my team or vice versa. That's what you like. So be
Hmm.
it. I don't care. It don't
Well,
matter to
there,
me.
well, there you go. Well, there you go. I really enjoyed having you on the show. What are some other questions that you really want to ask?
I don't.
Hmm.
Still trying to learn as we go there. I don't know. I was just kind of curious. I guess that was one of my main things is how do what, because I've actually kicked around. I mean, I've got so many irons in the fire anyway, but I've kind of kicked around the ideas of trying to do some little podcasting, maybe a local level. I guess, everybody starts on a local level, and then it kind of, if it's a good content, it's going to keep growing, one
Yeah,
way or
well,
another.
that's the other thing too, is that the audio space is like saturated with too many people and too much content. And I
Yeah,
think that's great for the most part. I really do. I support it. I really do. But I think it becomes harder for people to tell who they're listening to differentiate things. Things all kind of blur together sometimes, So
yeah.
that is a fair consideration. But but yeah, what about your book, man? When are you gonna write a book?
Oh Lord, I had a friend of mine. She's actually from up in Indiana. She came down and shared her testimony at our church. I met her in Spokane, Washington, and when I was at a conference there, was involved in a combine accident.
Oh
She
boy.
was actually caught up at a combine, and it basically ripped off one of her legs at the hip socket
I've
and
heard of
her.
this. This happens actually frequently, not all the time, but a lot of people do get hurt with the equipment. It does
Yeah,
happen. Yeah.
Lori Hain is her name, and but she's awesome. We've kind of become good friends. We talk here, and she was actually asking me the other day about a book. You need to write a book. You need to write a book. And she said, because I've done been told. She said, I think I'm going to explore them options. Of course, I know it's time consuming. Of course, at the same
Hmm.
time nowadays you can do audio, dictate everything, and then kind of as far as literally sitting down and writing a book. But I'm not going to say I would never do it. I've thought about it. I just gotta, it's like with any writer, you've just got to be in the frame of mind to do it, and start it.
By the way, let me tell you, from my heart to yours, man, I love hearing you talk. Your beautiful Tennessee accent. I love hearing you. And be proud of that.
Oh,
Illustrate
I
that
am,
beautiful that accent. I love hearing you talk. That proud American Tennessee, that beautiful way that you have such a clear and beautiful and endearing way of speaking, man. If you write a book, you got to narrate it for me because I'm
do an
like,
audio book.
you
Yeah.
got to do an audio because part of you is that country, is
Yeah.
that love in your heart, that love, happy country that, sometimes it's said that we're all 6 years old at heart. And I can tell that, Duck, you're like that. In that soul of all the experiences you've had, there's still that happy child in there, that still, you're still a happy person, a happy country soul in there, man. You got,
Well,
you, you
I
got to
shared
write a
that in,
book.
I shared that in an interview one time with somebody that said it resonated. And I can't remember how I worded it, but it was like, I'm gonna live my life with my vision loss. I'm not gonna let my vision loss run my
live
life.
just go about your business. Don't let the RP run you. You're going to run the
Yeah,
RP.
yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta live with it. So I mean, it's a part of you. It's
There you
like it ain't no
go.
different in your hand. If you
Hmm.
lose your hand, what are you gonna do? You got to live with it and find another way around it. It's like as far as country, and being, and that's kind of it's just, I use this analogy about every presentation I've done, the last three or four of them. I said, being a farmer, you got to be a mechanic too. And what does a mechanic have? He has a toolbox. And in that toolbox, he's got whatever tool he needs to accommodate whatever situation he's got to work on. So for me, my cell phone is my toolbox, and the
Right.
apps that I use is my tool. This one app may not work for this particular situation. So I'll reach in my toolbox, grab another app. That's just like seeing AI. It may be a screwdriver. Be My Eyes may be a crescent wrench. Chat GPT may be a ratchet and socket. It's whatever I need. I grab my tools and get the job done rather than trying to scratch my head and figure it out. I just go to the toolbox till I find the tool that I need.
There you go. That's what life's about, man. Finding the tools you need and just keep on being happy and keep farming. And that's a wonderful, you have a wonderful life there, man. You absolutely do. Yeah. All right. Well, do you have any final beautiful parting words that you want to tell everybody before we wrap it up today?
Well, like I said, being country, and I've said this earlier, it's just, you know, I can't say that with vision loss or any kind of disability, but I can speak specifically with vision loss because I have to deal with it. It's just, it's what you make of it. You can crawl up in a corner and pout and piss and moan and groan and suck your finger and all that kind of stuff and cry about it, or you can get out and just make the best of what you got and do something. Because like I said, my grandfather told me growing up, can't, never could do anything. So if you say you can't do it, then odds are you're probably not going to do it. So, find a workaround and do what you got to do, and, find that niche. Everybody's got their own niche. And until you experiment, it's not always going to fall in your lap. And it's not always going to be easy. But if you can find that niche and find success in doing it, that's the rewarding part. And when you find that niche, don't keep it for yourself. Share it with other people, because somebody may need that niche that you found to move forward and making their life successful.
There you go. If someone wants to get in touch with Jason Duck Barber, how can you be reached?
Well, I've actually got I've got a couple of different avenues, but I have a YouTube channel, and we touched on that earlier. I actually have a 1-hour documentary that kind of is my journey of where I'm at. It's actually Walk by Faith, Not by Sight. It's the journey of Jason Duck Barber. It's on my YouTube channel. I kind of coined that from the scripture of, I think it's Proverbs 5:7. No, I can't remember now. I just drew a blank. Anyway, it's 5:7, and that's the scripture, walk by faith and not by sight. And that's kind of my mantra of life. I live by my faith and what God's pointing me in the right direction. But the title of the YouTube channel, and I've got several channels on it. I created it about a year and a half ago. And the purpose of it was that I wanted to show people, or it might have been longer than that even people here ask me all the time, well, if you can't see well, how can you do this on the farm? How do you do this? How do you do that? Well, rather than explain it to people, I said, I'm going to show you. So on my YouTube channel, you'll see how I use even a lot of newer assistive technologies to do things on the farm, as well as even some old school techniques that my grandfather taught me growing up that I use even now. So you can kind of intertwine it with new technology and old technology. And I also do have a Facebook page by the same name, Farming Blind with Duck. Plain and simple, Farming Blind with Duck. Subscribe to my channel, like my videos, and drop me a comment on anything and say, hey, I heard you on, the opinion, or the podcast, or I live in such and such area, or I know somebody. I've always wanted to be a farmer. You'd be surprised in some of these Facebook groups that I'm part of when I share my story. They're like, wow, I always like to try to be a farmer. I thought that'd be kind of cool. Well, there again, if you don't put your mind to it and explore it, you don't know whether you can do it or not. So, talking about it ain't going to get anything done. You got to put your mind to it.
And you got to do it. And that's what you did today. That's what you did today, Duck. Yep. All right, everybody. Well, this is Aaron's opinion. He's Jason Duck Barber, Farming Blind with Duck. Absolutely fascinating human being. And just, if nothing else, you're just a wonderful guy to have in anybody's corner, no matter what. All right, man. We'll stay on the line for just another 30 seconds. But until then, everybody, thanks for listening. Be well out there. Keep farming, keep podcasting. And of course, help one person today. Help 1 million people tomorrow.